Equality, diversity and inclusion, a subject that's spoken about in all sectors of society these days, and quite rightly so. And to speak to me about one aspect of it is a colleague of mine, Reema Bharakda-Patel. Reema, a former colleague of mine, took a break to bring up a young family, and we're very pleased to say that she's back with us again. And as I've mentioned in the general introduction to this series, this is all about engagement, and Reema's never really lost contact with us, but she's re-engaging. She's now with a company quite close to where my firm is, Trendon Thomas Chartered Surveyors. Reema's taken up the gauntlet and started back where she left off, dealing with dispute resolution under the Party Wall, etc. Act. Reema sort of is a great example of what we will be talking about throughout this series. It's somebody that came from a totally different educational background, which she'll be telling you about, and she had a meteoric rise through the faculty, reaching the status of director. So Reema, welcome, and thank you for coming along today. And this is not the first time we've done something like this, is it? Mm-hmm. Back in 2021, we participated in a very crude version or recording of an audio podcast where I sort of hit you with a fact that not many of us knew, and I had only just looked it up myself. But I mentioned that in 1922, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors admitted Irene Barclay as the first woman chartered surveyor in Britain. And I noted that perhaps that was no coincidence that Irene's achievements followed the passage of the Sex Discrimination Removal Act 1919. Now, for our listeners and viewers, Irene was closely followed by Evelyn Perry, who qualified in 1923. Now, these two ladies went on to form their own partnership, Barclay and Perry Chartered Surveyors. Their female-led firm was groundbreaking in a male-dominated profession, not least in their work in the provision of social housing. They helped to establish several housing associations, contributing to the building of nearly 1,000 homes most famously helped to improve living conditions in the slums as they were in St Pancras in London. With such an impressive role models for these women in surveying, I unfairly asked Reema out of the blue in that podcast what her views were on women in surveying over 100 years later. And so Reema and I both admitted at the time in making that podcast that we were not aware of these two ladies until very recently. And I remember asking you, Reema, whether this is a symptom historically of poor promotion of women in surveying. And have your views changed since that original podcast?
Ever so slightly. I think over the last, I would say 4 years, I would say there are more women coming into the profession. And it's very nice to see. Not only are they, they're in the background getting all their ladders and all of that sort of things out, but they're standing up and providing talks. So I still believe that it's still male dominated, but there are changes that are coming.
I think we're probably seeing it in websites of surveying firms where they always used to show the gentleman there with his hard hat and viz jacket.
Yeah.
I'm noticing on a few websites now that we're showing ladies wearing the same attire, aren't we?
Yeah, so that is very nice to see that women are in their high-vis jackets, in their hard hats, doing the same jobs as their male colleagues. It's inspiring, I believe, to see that.
But with such poor promotion in the past, and despite we're seeing improvements, despite poor promotion and encouragement for women to become surveyors, perhaps you can tell us why you came into the profession.
I think from a young age, you're led to feel, probably from your parents, you need to know where you're going in life. You need to start thinking now what it is that you want to do. So, I went to university. I studied business law and human resource management. Very quickly, I realised that I'm not too sure about this. I feel like, HR wasn't something that I wanted to get into. Maybe the law aspect still excited me, but I thought, let's carry on. And then once I finished university, I worked for Helifix, who are a construction firm. I helped them with their promotion and marketing. That then led me on to shadowing some of the other surveyors, getting an insight into the construction world and its technicalities, which landed me a role with yourself, Stephen, at your firm, at Woodward Chartered Surveyors. With you being a great mentor and my legal background, and then, the knowledge of construction, my passion for construction just grew. And I really enjoyed it.
Good. It's interesting you mentioned the law, because I feel that out of all the professions, the lawyers have shown a greater progression. There's clearly more female barristers, lawyers, in proportion, particularly in terms of surveyors, isn't there? I mean, I think the lawyers are doing a better job at the moment, aren't they?
I agree, and I think there are many women surveying, women in surveying, and they're providing the talks. But I think what's important here, especially with party wall work, is understanding and interpreting the Act, and you need those professionals to help educate us and help us with any new scenario that we may come across. But there is a lot of women in the legal background that have shown interest in construction from the legal background.
So you didn't abandon the idea of law altogether then?
No, I didn't. I'll be very honest with you. I didn't know where I was going to go. I mean, whilst I was at Helifix, it did excite me. I was intrigued to learn more, but it wasn't until I joined your firm and your enthusiasm and your passion just led mine to grow even further.
It's very much the sliding doors, isn't it, really? But I mean, you did join me as the paralegal side of things.
Yes, I did.
And that is an interesting aspect of what we do as party wall surveyors, because in another podcast in this 6-part series we're doing, Alex Frame, the president, is talking about the quasi-judicial role. We're appearing to be, that Alex has told me, that's what it means in Latin. So that legal aspect is a vital ingredient in being a party wall surveyor. So I suppose that was good for you. It helped you to keep engaged with law,
yes,
but a different type of law. And I think it's for people that are considering maybe a career change. Did you find that what you were taught as a graduate lawyer helped in interpreting the Act, formulating arguments or resolution disputes situations? Was that good training for you?
Absolutely, because when you have a legal background, your brain is wired in a different way. Let's just talk about the Act itself. Like, we know that it's open to interpretation, so everyone's opinion on a subject matter or how they read a certain matter is very different. But it's the wordings that are very different, because it's not just plain English that you're reading. So you should be able to interpret that, and be wired and be trained, shall I say.
And a lot of surveyors I know are still intimidated in talking to lawyers, because we do go to lawyers, don't we, for advice on some issues, and we have them come along to our forums. But you've ceased to be intimidated by lawyers or judges.
Yeah, they don't scare me anymore.
But it's good because, we are talking, the main theme of this series of podcasts of 6 is about engagement from people with different walks of life, different cultural backgrounds, different agendas as well, but also professions. And I find it fascinating that you come into all those categories in many, many ways. And I have to ask the question, don't I, that have you ever encountered sexism in the workplace?
I have. It hasn't happened often, and when it does knock your confidence. I've been up against, and it's generally, in my experience has been the older male generation who, look at you as if you don't know what you're talking about. They have very derogatory comments and sexist humour that comes across. But I just think, let their ego, they're egotistic, I'd say. Let them carry on saying what they need to. Do not be intimidated by them. There are many women I find nowadays are surpassing their male colleagues in the profession. So what I would say, just do not be intimidated, because sometimes you know more than they do.
Isn't it? I know when we did that original podcast all those years ago, your erstwhile colleague and my current colleague, Kate Farrow, was saying that when she's putting a ladder up to get access into a loft, they will come and hold the ladder for her, or they will hold her bags. Probably well-meaning, and it's a cultural thing and maybe a generational thing. But do you find that you're treated differently when you're doing your inspections by lay people?
I do, and to be honest, it's not even your fellow colleagues that do this. It's the homeowners as well. So you go in there, and I've received comments, oh, you're too little. Are you sure you're going to be able to get up there and manage that ladder? I've had that. It's difficult to change.
But hopefully, with the older generation, me amongst them, they're moving on, being educated, which is something we're hitting upon throughout this series podcast about education. It's not just about technical side of things, is it? But it's about the cultural side of things. And I suppose, and it was a question I asked you back in 21, and I'd be interested to see what you feel now. But if you remember, it said it's perhaps unfair to expect the RICS, because we're talking about those two ladies over 100 years ago, the first female members of the RICS. And it's probably unfair to expect the RICS, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, to act solely in promoting and encouraging women into the industry, particularly within the discipline of party wall surveying. The Faculty of Party Wall Surveyors has a diverse professional membership, including building and quantity surveyors, architects, engineers, and many others who have made an impressive career change from a totally different occupation. So Reema, you're one such person, as we've already discovered. You've made that career change. Your first degree in law. What would you say to women who are considering proposing to do a similar thing? What would you say to them 3 years later that may be different from what you said back in 2021?
I don't think my opinion changes, in that if you want to do something different and try something else out, go for it. There's nothing to say that, there's only certain people that can do a particular job. More people should be encouraging of those career changes and giving women the opportunity to show them what they can do. So I think just do not be afraid to enter a different world, shall I say. And it doesn't matter how old you are, because I don't think it's ever too late.
And as a young mother with a daughter and a son, but particularly with focusing on your daughter, what would you be giving to your daughter if she said, "Mum, I want to get into construction. I want to become a party wall surveyor"? What would you say to her?
Go for it. Go for it, and I'll hold her hand throughout it all and encourage her all the way. She can do whatever she wants. I mean, at the moment, she loves playing with cars. Go ahead and play with cars. It doesn't matter. She doesn't need to be a ballet dancer, or mainly, I guess, majority of the teachers are female. She doesn't have to do all those things. She can be whatever she wants to be.
And we've got an existing situation where we're trying to consider now that we've spoken on another episode of this podcast series of the forums. And you used to help me, didn't you, organise these live forums pre-COVID, where live forums were very much the thing to do, wasn't it? And obviously along comes COVID, and along came Teams and Zoom sessions, which saved the day. We were able to communicate and do our forums online. And there has been a cultural change there in that we're trying to encourage people back to the live events, but they seem very reticent. But I feel that, and I was amongst them, I was probably a little bit arrogant, thinking, well, that's just being lazy, isn't it? But you suddenly realise that out of that terrible time, the pandemic, and we were having these podcasts, it solved a lot of other issues that young parents, young mothers, not having to worry about the school run necessarily, not having to actually travel into London and so forth. So it makes them more accessible. And talk has been also mentioned about having these the problems of having these live events, which are usually in a very nice, lovely local pub with a room upstairs, but the drinking culture and young ladies turning up with lots of men standing around drinking and so forth. Would you agree with me that I've now seen the light, that first and foremost, that there is a need to reconsider how, when and where we actually deliver these forums? Absolutely.
I think just as you said, there are women, or not even women, just other men, just generally having these forums in a venue like a pub. I know we're all winding down towards the evening, but I think women do feel intimidated coming into that sort of setting. Honestly, it's great to have these forums over Zoom. I think it's brilliant because it's just easy access. You can log on from wherever you are, but I still feel that the face-to-face ones are brilliant still, because you get the opportunity to network, and that also, if we still have those, that will encourage more women to go out and interact with their other male colleagues and show them, I know something. I think we've all learnt a lot, even from 2021, haven't we, Reema? And I'd like to thank you for coming in today and sharing your experiences with us firsthand of what it's like. And I hope our viewers and listeners have enjoyed this podcast. And we'll show you how Reema has engaged through various different ways, overcoming and still addressing various obstacles. But I hope it's an encouragement to you all. Thank you very much. Thank you.